Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I worked at a group home for adults with developmental and physical disabilities. These weren't kids, they were grown men in their 30s and 40s who needed support with daily living. The state had placed them in our care, and we took that responsibility seriously. The house had strict rules about visitors. We had a dedicated visitation room with its own entrance, completely separate from where the residents lived. This room was nice too, comfortable chairs, a TV with cable, gaming console with tons of games, DVD player with movies, board games, and even a small bathroom. Families could visit by appointment only to make sure two families weren't there at the same time. The rule was simple. If other residents were home, visitors stayed in that room only. No exceptions. It didn't matter if someone's dad wanted to see their bedroom or if mom wanted to check if they needed new clothes. The other residents had a right to privacy in their own home. 5 families understood this completely. They were grateful their loved ones were in a safe place and respected our boundaries. But then there was my resident's mother and grandmother. Let's call the mother Karen because she was the definition of entitled. From day one, Karen and her mother believed they had special rights. They thought they could inspect the entire house and check on the other residents whenever they wanted. Karen would yell that this was ridiculous and that he was her baby and she had rights. I would try to explain that I understood her concerns, but these rules protected everyone's privacy and dignity. Karen's mother would refuse to leave the room until we let them see his bedroom. I would tell them it was impossible that day because the other residents were home and this was their private space too. What they didn't seem to grasp was that their son was actually a ward of the state. The fact that they even knew where he lived and could visit was a privilege, not a right. Our agency ran other homes where families had no idea where their relatives were and could only contact case managers for updates. Every visit became a battle. Karen and her mother would try to push past us into the main house. We had to station an extra staff member by the door just to physically block them. I lost track of how many times we had to call police to remove them from areas they weren't supposed to be in. That's when they started calling the police on us, demanding officers force us to let them tour the house. After the 3rd time they pulled this stunt, we'd had enough. Their son lost his visitation privileges and was transferred to another home where they didn't know the address. Karen went nuclear. She screamed that we couldn't keep her from her baby and that this was illegal. I told her that the decision had been made for everyone's safety and well-being. She threatened that we would pay for this and that she knew he was still here and she was going to find him. The threats kept coming. Phone calls at all hours, showing up at the property screaming. A judge granted us a restraining order keeping them 800 feet away from the house, all staff, all residents, with no phone contact allowed. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet. I was working the evening shift about 2 months later. It was getting late and I was doing my final security check, locking all doors and windows before setting the alarm. 2 other staff members were handling bedtime medications and helping residents with their nighttime routines. Another was starting laundry. That's when I smelled it. Smoke? Just faint whiffs, like someone had a campfire going. I asked the other staff if they smelled smoke. One of them told me I was crazy and that we had just checked the whole house. I said I was serious and that it smelled like something was burning. They suggested maybe a neighbor had a backyard fire going and I probably caught a whiff when I was closing windows. But the smell kept getting stronger. Soon everyone could smell it. We decided to do another complete sweep of the house in pairs. Nothing looked wrong, but the smoke smell was definitely getting worse. We met back in the living room and that's when we saw it. Actual wisps of smoke starting to drift through the air. The fire alarm started going off. Training kicked in. We woke all the residents, got them dressed in shoes and jackets, and headed for the van. The smoke was thicker now, moving toward the bedrooms. We had to get everyone out immediately. The living room sat in the center of our house with an open floor plan. Kitchen on one side, laundry on the other, bedrooms down hallways on both sides. Our office was at the far end where we kept the van keys. When we rounded the corner of the house heading to the parking area, we found our answer. The front porch was completely engulfed in flames. The brick construction was keeping it from spreading outward, but fire was climbing toward the roof. Fire trucks and police cars arrived just when we reached the van with all 6 residents. The firefighters immediately went to work while officers headed our way to make sure everyone was accounted for. That's when 4 people came running out of the darkness straight toward us. Karen and her mother, plus 2 men I'd never seen before. They were screaming at the top of their lungs. Karen shrieked about where her baby was and that they were here to rescue him from us people. Karen's mother yelled that we had left him in that death trap and tried to murder her grandson. They looked around frantically at our group of residents and realized their son wasn't there. Karen screamed about where he was and accused us of leaving him to burn. She threatened to sue us and shut this place down and send us all to prison for murder. The police officer quickly stepped between them and us. He asked me if we had left anyone inside the building. I told him no, we had all 6 residents right there. I explained that, for their safety, we needed to get them in the van and then we could explain what was happening. The officers held Karen and her mother back while they continued shrieking about their son supposedly burning alive inside. 2 staff members loaded the residents into the van while my co-worker and I talked to police. I explained to the officer that those 2 women had a restraining order against them and weren't supposed to be within 800 feet of this property. I told him their son was moved to a different location for safety reasons and they didn't know where he was now. The officer immediately handcuffed both women and told them to quiet down. The officer asked what had happened that evening. We explained the night's events while firefighters worked. One of them came over to speak with the officers. The firefighter told them they had preliminary evidence this fire was set deliberately and there would be a formal investigation. Karen and her mother were arrested for violating the restraining order and suspicion of arson. The 2 men with them were also arrested on suspicion of arson, but the investigation revealed something much worse than simple arson. Not only had they deliberately set our front porch on fire, they had rigged some kind of device to the door leading out of the visitation room. The fire investigator said it would have been fatal to whoever opened that door and could have seriously injured or killed anyone nearby. They had no idea there was another exit on the opposite side of the house. That door, the one we used to escape, had saved all our lives. The 4 conspirators were indicted on vandalism, arson, 8 counts of attempted homicide, and 2 counts of attempted murder. They took a plea deal and each got 7 to 10 years in prison. Karen's obsession with controlling her adult son's life had turned her into someone willing to kill innocent people. 8 lives almost ended that night because she couldn't accept that her baby was a grown man who needed to live independently from her interference. The residents never knew how close they came to dying. They just knew they had an adventure riding in the van late at night and got to watch real firefighters work. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. Our new location has even better security systems. And Karen, she'll be out of prison eventually, but she'll never know where any of us are ever again. When I was in college, money was tight. I was scraping by on ramen noodles and whatever part-time work I could find. That's how I got into fixing cars in my spare time. I had this little setup behind my apartment where I'd work on people's vehicles for cash under the table. The work was steady enough. Word spread around campus that I could fix most car problems for half what the shops charged. Students would drop their cars off, I work on them over a day or 2, and they'd pick them up running better than before. It was a good arrangement until someone decided to help themselves to what wasn't theirs. I first noticed it about 3 weeks into summer break. Cars that came in with half a tank would leave with just fumes. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things or that the owners had used more gas than I remembered. But then it kept happening. Someone was stealing gas right from under my nose. The really irritating part was that they never touched my beat-up Honda. They knew exactly which cars were mine and which belonged to customers. This wasn't some random desperate person grabbing gas from any car they could find. This was someone who had been watching, planning, and targeting the cars I was working on specifically. I tried staying up late a few nights to catch them, but I needed sleep to function during the day. I considered setting up some kind of alarm system, but I didn't have the money for anything sophisticated. The thief was smart too. They'd hit the same car multiple times if it sat there long enough, like they were keeping track of when I'd fill up the tanks after working on the engines. Then I got a break at my day job. I was working at this electronics repair shop, mostly just breaking down old equipment for salvage parts. The boss had gotten a contract to scrap some industrial machinery, and part of my job was to strip out anything valuable before the rest went to the dump. One of the machines had these thick rubber bladders with threaded connectors built into one end. I had no idea what they were originally for, but they looked like they could hold pressure. My coworker thought it would be hilarious to hook one up to the compressed air line and see what happened. He told me to watch when the thing would explode like a balloon. He connected it and opened the valve. The bladder inflated maybe 6 inches before it let go with the loudest bang I'd ever heard in my life. Even wearing ear protection and standing across the shop, the sound nearly knocked me over. It was like someone had fired a cannon indoors. The boss came running over demanding to know what that terrible noise was. My co-worker went white and started stammering about how he was just testing the equipment. The boss nearly fired him on the spot, but more importantly, he'd given me the perfect idea for catching my gas thief. I asked if I could have a few of the bladders and one of the dump valves from the scrap pile. The boss didn't care what happened to stuff that was heading for the dumpster anyway, so I loaded up a box with my new supplies. Next, I needed bait. I remembered that a buddy of mine had asked me to look at his sister's car a few months back. It was this ancient Ford with an engine that was basically dead. The thing burned so much oil that it left a smoke trail everywhere it went. Back then, scrap cars weren't worth anything. The junkyard might give you $25 if you drove it there yourself, or maybe trade you a few used parts for the whole vehicle. I called my buddy and asked if his sister was still trying to get rid of that Ford. He said nobody wanted that piece of junk and asked why I was interested. I told him I needed it for a project. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but arrangements were made. Soon I was the proud owner of a car that belonged in a museum of automotive disasters. The plan was simple but required some mechanical work. I removed the gas tank completely and installed my large air compressor tank in the trunk. The rubber bladder went underneath the car where it would be hidden but could still make maximum noise when it popped. The tricky part was rigging the trigger mechanism. I connected the dump valve to the gas cap door with fishing line, drilling holes right through the body to run the line properly. When someone opened the gas cap door, it would pull a lever that opened the dump valve, sending compressed air rushing into the bladder until it exploded. My buddy watched me work and wondered if this would actually work. I told him that if it didn't scare them off, nothing would. We tested it a few times during the day, adjusting the tension on the fishing line until it triggered reliably. The explosion was just loud when it was happening right under the car. Anyone trying to siphon gas would be standing directly over it when it went off. I rerouted the fuel line into a small gas can in the trunk so the car would still run, then drove it over to my usual parking spot. Now came the hard part, waiting. For almost a week, nothing happened. I had to sneak out a couple times to refill the air tank because of a slow leak, but otherwise I just went about my business and hoped the thief would take the bait. Then, around 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, it happened. Boom! The sound woke me from a dead sleep and had me scrambling for clothes. By the time I got outside, whoever it was had vanished into the night. The gas cap door was hanging open. Air was hissing from under the Ford where the bladder had been, and there on the ground was a beautiful metal gas can with a rubber hose still attached. I stood there in my pajamas, grinning. The thief had left behind their equipment and run for their life. I could only imagine what went through their mind when that bladder exploded right underneath them. They probably thought someone had taken a shotgun blast at them in the dark. From that night forward, the mysterious gas disappearances stopped completely. Word must have gotten around that my parking area wasn't a safe place to steal fuel anymore. I never found out who the thief was, but I didn't really care. The problem was solved. I still have that gas can sitting on a shelf in my garage. The spout broke off years ago and I don't even use it anymore, but I keep it there. I love my job, which might sound weird to some people, but I do. We have this great group of regular customers who come in, and over the years, I got to know them pretty well. Some of them have become more than just customers, they're like family. Two of my regulars are disabled veterans who are both wheelchair bound. They come to our store for years, and we always make it a point to help them out when they need it. It's just the right thing to do. They can't easily get out of their vehicles to pump gas or grab items from inside, so we go out to them. Most days there are two people working, but sometimes it's just one person on shift during the afternoon hours when the manager has already left. This day was one of those solo shifts, and it was crazy busy. We had a big fishing tournament going on in town, plus it was summer, so tourists were everywhere. I had a steady line of customers all afternoon, mostly regulars who just wanted to grab cigarettes or pay for gas they'd already pumped. Our store isn't a prepay location yet, even though corporate keeps pushing for it. I was ringing up customers when the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and recognized the number. It was one of my veteran regulars. I looked out the window and saw him sitting in his van in the parking lot. I caught his eye through the window and held up one finger to let him know I'd be out in just a minute. I made a mental note of where the last person in line was standing so I'd know when to go help him. When I finished with that customer, I turned to the people still waiting in line and politely explained that I had a wheelchair-bound customer outside who I needed to assist first. Everyone was understanding about it. Most of our customers are regulars, and they know how we operate here. I was just getting ready to head outside when my second veteran regular pulled into the parking lot. I walked over to the door and called out to him that I'd be out in a few minutes to pump his gas for him. He comes here for years, so he knows I keep my word. He told me to take my time and that there was no problem waiting. When I was walking back toward the store, I held the door open for a woman who was walking in. She looked to be in her 40s, well dressed, and seemed like she was in a hurry. I made a mental note that she'd be next after I helped my second veteran, since he had arrived first. I went and gathered all the items my first veteran had requested over the phone, some snacks, a couple drinks, and cigarettes. I rang everything up, took his payment, and walked the bags out to his van. The whole process took maybe 2 minutes. When I walked back into the store, I was hit with an angry voice. The woman I'd held the door for was yelling at me, asking why I was running around outside when I had customers waiting inside. I apologized and explained that the gentleman was actually next in line, and that he had called ahead so I was just helping him with his order. She got even more upset and said that he should come inside like everyone else, that she didn't have time for this. I tried to explain that he was in a wheelchair and couldn't easily get into the store, and that we always helped our disabled customers. She shot back that he should bring someone with him then, and that this whole situation was unacceptable. I decided to ignore her comments and focus on the other customers who had been waiting patiently. I quickly rang up the next few people in line. Most of them just needed to pay for gas or grab cigarettes, so it went pretty fast. The whole time this woman kept complaining loudly about having to wait, making comments about how long everything was taking. I got through everyone else and it was her turn. I started to explain that I needed to help the veteran outside first since he'd been waiting, but she cut me off. She demanded to know why her card wasn't working at the pump and told me to fix it right away. I told her that I'd be happy to help her in just a moment, but I needed to assist the gentleman outside first since he was there before she was. She got right in my face and said that she was next in line and I needed to help her first. She said she didn't have time to wait around for my little charity cases. I felt my jaw clench at that comment, but I kept my voice professional. I've been in retail long enough to know not to take the bait. I told the few customers who had come in while we were talking that I'd be right back, then headed outside to pump gas for my veteran regular. It took about 2 minutes. I swiped his card, filled up his tank, and chatted briefly about how his week was going. The moment I walked back through the door, she was right there waiting for me. She said it was about time and that I had taken long enough. That was it. I'd had enough. I stopped and looked directly at her. I told her that I had 2 regular customers who were both disabled veterans and wheelchair bound, and that we helped them whenever they came in. I explained that sometimes there were Two people here to help, sometimes not, and they almost never came in at the same time like today. I said that yes, I was busy, but I had helped them in the order they arrived. I pointed out that I had heard nothing but complaints from her, while every other customer had been patient and understanding. I mentioned that several people had actually praised me for helping those veterans. I asked her why she felt they should have to wait longer just because she came in after them. She said she didn't care about any of that, that she was in a hurry and needed to get to work. Before I could respond, she actually put her hands on me and pushed me toward the register. She told me to just do my job and help her. That crossed a major line. I stepped back from her and told her that I was refusing service and that she needed to leave the store right now. She said no and demanded that I call my manager because she wanted to speak to him right now. I told her he wasn't there and that I wasn't calling him. I asked her to leave again. She said that I would call my manager and that she demanded it. I was about to call the police when I noticed someone in line who I recognized. It was our local sheriff, still in uniform but off duty, waiting to pay for his coffee. Perfect timing. I called out to the sheriff and asked if he could step up to the counter. The sheriff had been watching the whole situation unfold, and he came forward right away. I watched this woman's face turn completely white when she realized what was happening. The sheriff asked if there was a problem. I explained that the customer had just put her hands on me and pushed me, that she'd been verbally abusive, and that I'd asked her to leave but she was refusing. The sheriff turned to her and asked if it was true that she had put her hands on me. She said that she had barely touched me and that I wasn't doing my job. The sheriff asked me if I wanted to press charges for battery. I didn't even hesitate and said yes, I would. Her eyes went wide and she started backing toward the door, saying that the whole thing was ridiculous and that she had barely touched me. But the other customers who had witnessed everything weren't having it. They'd seen her push me and they blocked her path to the door while the sheriff called for a deputy to respond. The sheriff told her that she needed to stay right where she was. Within about 5 minutes, a deputy arrived. This woman, who had been so demanding and aggressive just minutes before, was now crying when they put handcuffs on her. The sheriff explained to the deputy that she was being charged with battery and public disturbance and told her that she was banned from our location. He told her that she was also trespassed from the property and that if she came back, she'd be arrested for trespassing. When they were loading her into the patrol car, I noticed there was a kid sitting in her vehicle, probably around 10 years old. Turns out her husband had to leave work to come pick up their child, and from the look on his face when he arrived, he was not happy with his wife at all. Both of my veteran regulars came back the next day to thank me for not letting that woman bully me into treating them poorly. They said it meant a lot to know that someone had their back. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.